The Galactic Defense Summit convened on the neutral world of Kepler Prime, its crystalline towers reaching toward 3 different suns. Representatives from 47 species gathered in the grand amphitheater, their various forms creating a rainbow of scales, fur, carapaces, and energy fields. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert thousands of languages into comprehensible communication. Admiral Zephyrus of the Altarian fleet stood at the central podium, his 8 tentacles gesturing gracefully as he addressed the assembly. His species had dominated galactic warfare for 3 millennia, their advanced plasma weaponry and quantum shields making them nearly invincible in open combat. "Fellow beings," Zephyrus announced, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "we face an unprecedented crisis. The Void Swarm has broken through our outer defense perimeters in the Andromeda sector. Their numbers exceed anything we've encountered before." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. The Void Swarm was a parasitic species that consumed entire worlds, leaving nothing but empty husks floating in space. They had been contained beyond the galactic rim for over 1,000 years. But something had changed. Their new tactics suggested intelligence behind their movements, coordination that made them far more dangerous than the mindless hunger they had displayed before. General Thorak of the Krillian warrior caste slammed his massive fist on his delegation's table, causing several smaller species to jump. His rock-like hide gleamed under the artificial light as he spoke. "My warriors have fought the swarm for decades. We know their weaknesses. Give us enough firepower and we'll crush them like we always have." "Firepower won't be enough this time," interrupted Dr. Valea, the Etherean strategist whose translucent form shimmered with concern. "Our intelligence suggests they've evolved. They're using guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run strategies. They strike our supply lines and disappear before we can respond." The assembly erupted in debate. The Krillians favored direct assault, believing their superior strength and technology could overwhelm any enemy. The Altarians proposed orbital bombardment campaigns, using their advanced fleet to glass entire systems if necessary. The machine-like Nexus Collective calculated probability matrices, concluding that conventional warfare had only a 37% chance of success. In the midst of this chaos, a small figure stood up in the back of the amphitheater. Human Ambassador Sarah Chen cleared her throat and activated her communication device. The room gradually fell silent as delegates noticed the diminutive biped requesting attention. Zephyrus looked down at his datapad, checking the seating chart. The chair recognizes the representative from Earth? He couldn't hide the confusion in his voice. Earth was barely a footnote in galactic politics, having only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards, their military laughably small. Sarah Chen stepped forward, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other delegates. She was unremarkable by human standards: average height, dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, intelligent brown eyes that missed nothing. To the assembled aliens, she looked like a child playing dress-up. "Honorable delegates," she began, her voice steady despite the intimidating audience, "Earth would like to contribute to the defense effort." A sound that could only be described as galactic laughter filled the chamber. The Krillians' rumbling chuckles mixed with the Altarians' melodic trilling and the Nexus Collective's electronic buzzing that passed for amusement. Even the usually stoic Etherians seemed amused, their forms flickering with what their species considered humor. "No disrespect intended, Ambassador Chen," Zephyrus said, his tone patronizing, "but Earth's military capabilities are limited. Your species still uses kinetic weapons and chemical propellants. What could you possibly offer against an enemy that has stymied our most advanced forces?" Sarah's expression didn't change. "We offer our terrain warriors." The laughter grew louder. General Thorak stood up, his massive frame dwarfing everyone around him. Terrain warriors? What kind of warriors need terrain? A true warrior adapts to any environment, any condition. The Krillian battle code teaches that the strong impose their will upon the weak, regardless of circumstance. Your Krillian forces are indeed formidable in direct combat, Sarah acknowledged. But tell me, General, how many of your warriors have you lost to swarm ambushes in the past month? Thorak's expression darkened. The truth was painful. They had lost 3 entire battalions to surprise attacks. The swarm would emerge from asteroid fields or nebula clouds, strike hard and fast, then vanish before reinforcements could arrive. Traditional Krillian tactics were proving inadequate against an enemy that refused to stand and fight. Dr. Valaya floated forward, her curiosity overriding her amusement. What exactly are these terrain warriors you speak of? Our databases contain extensive information about Earth's military forces. We see conventional armies, air forces, naval units. Nothing particularly unique. Sarah smiled for the first time since taking the floor. That's because you're looking in the wrong places. Earth's most effective warriors aren't found in our regular military units. They come from traditions that predate our space age by thousands of years. Warriors who were forged in the mountains, jungles, and shadows of our world long before we knew other species existed. She activated a holographic display that showed Earth's geography. Vast mountain ranges, dense forests, sprawling deserts, and urban landscapes that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Earth is a death world, delegates. Every biome on our planet has tried to kill us for millennia. We didn't just adapt to survive. We learned to use the terrain itself as a weapon. The Nexus Collective's representative, a floating collection of metallic spheres, pulsed with interest. Define death world parameters. Our analysis indicates Earth falls within normal habitability ranges for carbon-based life. Your analysis didn't account for Earth's evolutionary pressures, Sarah replied. 99% of all species that ever lived on Earth are extinct. Those that survived did so by becoming the most efficient predators in the galaxy, including us. She gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on various terrain features. In the mountains of Nepal, we have warriors who can move silently through snow that would crush a Krillian soldier. In the Amazon rainforest, there are trackers who can follow a week-old trail through vegetation so dense that orbital scans can't penetrate it. In the deserts of Africa, nomads navigate by stars and wind patterns your computers couldn't calculate. Admiral Zephyrus tentatively raised a tentacle. Even if such individuals exist, how could they possibly contribute to a galactic-scale conflict? The Void Swarm operates in space, not in Earth's biomes. Because, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger, every world the Swarm has attacked had terrain. Every ambush site they've used had geography. Every hiding place they've found had environmental features they exploited. You've been fighting them like they're a conventional enemy, using conventional tactics. But they're not conventional. They're guerrilla fighters now. And Earth invented guerrilla warfare. The chamber fell silent. Several delegates began accessing their databases, cross-referencing human military history. What they found was disturbing. Earth's historical conflicts showed a pattern of smaller forces defeating larger ones through superior use of terrain, weather, and unconventional tactics. Humans had been fighting asymmetric warfare for their entire recorded history. You're suggesting, Dr. Valaya said slowly, that Earth's primitive warriors could teach advanced galactic forces how to fight? I'm suggesting that your advanced forces are thinking about this all wrong, Sarah replied. You're trying to use a hammer to perform surgery. The Swarm has adapted to your tactics because your tactics are predictable. They're based on technological superiority and conventional military doctrine. But what if you had warriors who thought like the terrain itself? Who could predict an enemy's movement by reading the shape of an asteroid field like a human reads a map? General Thorax snorted dismissively. Pretty words, human. But words don't win battles. Show us proof that these terrain warriors of yours are more than mythology. Sarah nodded. Very well. Earth requests permission to send a single representative to the Kepler Defense Station. Let our warrior observe your defensive preparations and make recommendations. If our suggestions prove worthless, we'll withdraw our offer and let you handle the crisis as you see fit. A single representative? Zephyrus asked. Against an enemy force that numbers in the millions? Sometimes, Sarah said quietly. One person who understands the battlefield is worth more than 1,000,000 who don't. The vote was unanimous, though not for the reasons Sarah hoped. Every delegate agreed to allow Earth's representative to visit Kepler Defense Station, partly out of curiosity, mostly for entertainment. The idea that a primitive human could contribute anything meaningful to their defense strategy was absurd, but it would be amusing to watch them try. As the session ended and delegates began filing out, many were already placing bets on how quickly the human would realize their mistake and request evacuation. None of them noticed the small smile that played across Sarah Chen's lips, or the way her eyes held the same patient intensity as a predator watching prey. 3 days later, a single transport pod requested docking permission at Kepler Defense Station. The station's massive bulk hung in space like a metallic mountain, its weapons arrays capable of sterilizing entire star systems. Inside, the finest military minds from dozens of species worked around the clock to develop strategies against the void swarm. The pod was so small it barely registered on their sensors. When it finally docked, the welcoming committee expected to see a delegation of Earth's finest military officers, perhaps accompanied by examples of their most advanced weapons technology. Instead, a single figure emerged from the pod. The being that stepped onto the station wore simple black clothing that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The garments were form-fitting, but allowed complete freedom of movement. Most delegates assumed it was some kind of environmental suit designed to protect the human from the station's atmosphere. They were wrong. The figure moved with a fluid grace that seemed to defy the station's artificial gravity. Each step was silent, each gesture economical. When other beings looked directly at the newcomer, they felt an odd sensation, as if they were looking at empty space where a person should be. Commander Vex of the Kepler Defense Force approached the human, his reptilian features arranged in what passed for a welcoming expression among his species. Welcome to Kepler Station, human. I am Commander Vex. We're curious to hear your recommendations for our defensive strategy. The figure bowed slightly, a gesture that somehow managed to convey respect while maintaining an aura of quiet danger. When the human spoke, the voice was soft, barely above a whisper, yet every being within 50 meters heard it clearly. I am Cage. I am here to learn about your enemy. And with that simple introduction, everything changed. Commander Vex led Kage through the corridors of Kepler Defense Station, pointing out various technological marvels with obvious pride. The station housed 40,000 military personnel from 17 different species, each area designed to accommodate different environmental needs. Gravity fields, atmospheric processors, and temperature controls created dozens of microenvironments within the massive structure. Our defensive grid extends 3 light minutes in all directions, Vex explained as they passed viewing ports that showed the vast array of weapon platforms and sensor networks surrounding the station. We have early warning systems that can detect approaching vessels from 5 parsecs away. Nothing gets within striking distance without us knowing about it. Kage said nothing, but those observant enough noticed how the human's eyes never stopped moving. They tracked maintenance personnel walking through corridors, noted the rhythm of patrol schedules, observed the blind spots created by architectural supports. The human seemed to be memorizing not just the station's layout, but its patterns of life and movement. They arrived at the Central Command Center, a massive chamber filled with holographic displays showing the local star system. Dozens of officers from various species monitored communications, sensor readings, and fleet movements. The main display showed the current positions of 3 Galactic Defense Force fleets, positioned in a defensive triangle around the station. "This is Admiral Korath of the 2nd Altarian Fleet," Vex said, gesturing toward a figure whose tentacles were interfacing directly with the command console. "She's our primary tactical coordinator." Admiral Korath acknowledged Kage with a brief nod, her attention focused on the tactical displays. "Human, you arrive at a critical time. Our scouts report increased void swarm activity in the outer system. They're probing our defenses, testing our response times." Kage moved closer to the displays, studying the 3-dimensional representation of local space. The humans' movements were so quiet that several officers started when they realized someone was standing directly behind them. "Show me their previous attack patterns," the human said. Admiral Korath activated a series of holographic recordings. The displays showed previous swarm attacks on other systems. Waves of dark, writhing creatures emerging from asteroid fields, nebula clouds, and the shadows of dead planets. Their ships were organic, constantly shifting and adapting. Traditional weapons seemed to have limited effect. The creatures' bodies absorbing or deflecting energy attacks, while their numbers overwhelmed defensive positions. "As you can see," Admiral Korath explained, "they favor surprise attacks from concealed positions. Our standard response is to establish overlapping fields of fire and maintain constant sensor sweeps to prevent ambushes." Kage watched the recordings in silence for several minutes. When the human finally spoke, the question caught everyone off guard. "How many of your officers have personally observed the terrain where these attacks occurred?" Admiral Korath's tentacles twitched in confusion. "Terrain? These battles took place in space. There is no terrain in vacuum." "There is always terrain," Kage replied softly. "You show me recordings from command vessels, sensors readings from a distance. But has anyone studied the asteroid fields where they hide? Walked through the nebula clouds they use for cover? Understood the gravitational currents and radiation patterns they exploit?" Commander Vex gestured toward the sensor displays. "Our long-range scanners provide complete tactical information. We can detect a swarm bioship from 50,000 kilometers away." "But can you predict where they will be 50,000 kilometers before they arrive?" Kage asked. "Can you read the space around an asteroid field and know which approach vector they will choose? Can you feel the rhythm of their movement through the cosmic winds?" The command center fell silent. Several officers exchanged glances, unsure whether the human was speaking metaphorically or suggesting some kind of mystical nonsense. The idea that space had terrain in any meaningful sense seemed ridiculous to beings who had been fighting stellar conflicts for millennia. General Thorak, who had arrived on the station that morning, stepped forward with barely concealed irritation. "Human, your species has been in space for barely 50 of your years. We have been fighting void battles since before your son was born. There is no terrain in space. There is only superior firepower and tactical positioning." Kage turned to face the massive Krillian warrior. Up close, the size difference was almost comical. Thorak stood nearly 3 meters tall and massed probably 10 times what the human did. Yet something in Kage's posture suggested the human was not intimidated in the slightest. "General," Kage said, voice still barely above a whisper, "you have fought in space using the tactics of planet-bound armies. You position your forces, advance in formation, and engage in direct combat. But the Void Swarm fights like the wind, like shadows, like water finding the cracks in stone." "Pretty poetry," Thorak rumbled. "But when the swarm arrives, poetry won't protect this station." "Then let me show you something practical," Kage replied. The human moved to the central command console and began manipulating the holographic display. "Admiral Korath, Show me the current positions of your patrol vessels in sectors 7 through 12. The display shifted to show a detailed view of the outer system. Dozens of patrol craft moved in regular patterns, their routes designed to provide maximum sensor coverage with minimal gaps. It was a textbook defensive formation, the kind taught in military academies across the galaxy. Kaeg studied the display for a moment, then began highlighting specific positions with rapid gestures. If I were leading the swarm, I would strike here. The human marked a position that seemed random to the observers. The patrol vessel in Sector 9 will be at the far end of its patrol route in approximately 47 minutes. The sensor shadow from asteroid JK4701 will provide cover for an approach vector along this trajectory. Admiral Korath checked her calculations quickly. That's actually correct. But our overlapping sensor coverage would detect any approaching force well before they could reach striking distance. Not if they approached during the quantum storm predicted to pass through Sector 8 in 39 minutes, Cage continued, highlighting additional trajectory lines. The electromagnetic interference will create a sensor blind spot lasting approximately 4 minutes, enough time for a fast-moving force to penetrate the perimeter and strike the patrol vessel before reinforcements can respond. The command center erupted in activity as officers began verifying the humans' calculations. Admiral Korath's tentacles moved frantically across her console as she cross-referenced weather patterns, patrol schedules, and sensor ranges. After several minutes, she looked up with obvious surprise. The human is correct. There will be a brief window of vulnerability in 36 minutes. General Thorax snorted dismissively. Coincidence? Random chance. The swarm lacks the intelligence to calculate such precise timing. Does it? Kaeg asked quietly. Or have you been underestimating them because their intelligence doesn't match your expectations? Before anyone could respond, an alarm began sounding throughout the command center. The tactical displays flashed red as new contacts appeared on the sensors. Swarm bioships were emerging from exactly the position Kage had predicted, following precisely the approach vector the human had outlined. "Battle stations!" Admiral Korath commanded. "All units, code red alert!" The next few minutes were chaos. Orders flew across communication channels as defensive forces scrambled to respond to the unexpected attack. The patrol vessel in Sector 9 barely had time to send a distress signal before it was overwhelmed by swarming bioships. By the time reinforcements arrived, the swarm forces had already vanished back into the asteroid field, leaving only debris behind. When the immediate crisis passed, the command center fell silent. Every being present stared at Cage with new eyes. The human had predicted not just that an attack would come, but exactly when and how it would unfold. "How?" Admiral Korath asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How did you know?" Kaeg moved back to the tactical display, gesturing toward the asteroid field where the swarm had disappeared. "Because I read the battlefield the way my ancestors read mountain passes and forest paths. Space may seem empty to you, but it has currents and patterns just like any other environment. Gravity wells create valleys. Radiation fields form barriers. Quantum storms provide cover. The swarm has learned to move with these patterns instead of fighting against them." Commander Vex stepped closer to the display. "But our tactical computers analyze all these factors. We have complete mathematical models of local space." "Your computers see data points," Cage replied. "But data points don't tell you how a living enemy thinks and feels and moves. The swarm isn't following computer algorithms. They're following instincts honed by necessity. They move like predators because they are predators, and predators always seek the path that gives them the greatest advantage with the least risk." General Thorax's massive fists clenched in frustration. "Even if you can predict their movements, what good does it do? We still lack the firepower to stop them." "You don't need more firepower," Kaeg said, turning away from the display to face the assembled officers. "You need better positioning, better timing, better understanding of how to use the terrain to your advantage instead of theirs. Admiral Koreth's tentacles twitched with nervous energy. What are you proposing? For the first time since arriving at the station, Kaeg smiled. It was not a comforting expression. I'm proposing that instead of waiting for them to choose the time and place of battle, we choose it for them. Instead of defending against their attacks, we create situations where they have no choice but to attack where we want them to attack. A trap? Commander Vex asked. Not a trap, Kaeg replied. A hunt. But first, I need to understand your enemy better. I need to see them in their natural environment. Impossible, General Thorak declared. The swarm's territory is filled with biohazards, quantum anomalies, and radiation fields that would kill most species in minutes. Most species, Kaeg acknowledged. But my people have spent thousands of years learning to survive in hostile environments. We call it ninjutsu, the art of endurance, the way of the shadow. It teaches that any environment can be turned to your advantage if you understand it completely. Admiral Koreth studied the human with new interest. You're volunteering to infiltrate swarm territory alone? Not infiltrate, Kaeg corrected. Observe, learn, understand. When you fight an enemy you don't understand, you're fighting blind. But when you understand how they think, how they move, how they choose their battles, then you can predict their actions before they take them. The command center fell silent again. The idea that a single being could venture into the most dangerous region of space and return with useful intelligence seemed impossible. Yet the human had already demonstrated an uncanny ability to predict swarm behavior. Commander Vex looked around at his fellow officers, then back at Kaeg. What would you need for such a mission? A small, stealthy vessel, minimal life support. No weapons. Weapons create signatures that can be detected. I'll rely on stealth and patience instead of technology. And if you're discovered? Admiral Koreth asked. Kaeg's smile widened slightly. Then you'll learn whether Earth's ancient warrior traditions are as effective in space as they were in the mountains and forests of our homeworld. General Thorak shook his massive head. This is madness, sending a single primitive warrior against an enemy that has defeated entire fleets. Perhaps, Kaeg agreed. But consider this, General. Your fleets have been fighting the swarm for months using conventional tactics, and the swarm grows stronger with each engagement. What do you have to lose by trying a different approach? It was Admiral Koreth who finally broke the silence. Very well, human. You'll have your vessel and your chance to prove Earth's methods. But I want continuous monitoring of your mission. If you're captured or killed, we need to know immediately. Kaeg bowed again. The same gesture of respect and contained danger. Understood. But Admiral, when I return with intelligence about the swarm's true nature and capabilities, I hope you'll be prepared to abandon everything you think you know about warfare. Because the battle we're really facing isn't going to be won by superior firepower or better technology. It's going to be won by superior understanding. As the meeting broke up and officers returned to their duties, none of them noticed how quietly Kaeg moved through the corridors afterward. The humans seemed to float rather than walk, footsteps making no sound on the metal decking. By morning, several security officers would report feeling watched during their shifts, but their sensors showed nothing unusual. The Shadow Warrior from Earth was already practicing ancient skills in a stellar environment, preparing for a hunt that would determine the fate of the galaxy, the stealth vessel. Silent Current drifted through the outer darkness like a whisper of wind through cosmic dust. Built by Etherian shipwrights and modified with human specifications, it was barely larger than an escape pod, but equipped with the most advanced cloaking technology available. Its hull absorbed sensor frequencies instead of reflecting them, making it nearly invisible to conventional detection methods. Inside the cramped cockpit, Kaeg sat in perfect stillness, breathing slow and controlled. The human had been motionless for 6 hours, yet remained completely alert. This was Zazen adapted for space, the meditation of warriors who needed to remain ready for instant action while conserving energy during long periods of waiting. Through the viewports, the Void Swarm's territory stretched out in all directions. What galactic forces saw as empty space filled with dangerous anomalies, Kaeg read like an ancient forest path. The twisted wreckage of consumed worlds formed landmarks. Radiation clouds moved in predictable patterns, creating corridors of relative safety. The gravitational dance of dead stars established highways that living ships could follow. 3 days of silent observation had revealed patterns that no sensor array could detect. The swarm wasn't randomly destroying everything they encountered. They were farming, consuming certain types of matter while leaving others untouched. Building something vast and complex in the depths of space, a subtle vibration through the ship's hull alerted Kaeg to approaching movement. The human's eyes opened, instantly focused. Through the cosmic debris field ahead, shapes were moving, not the chaotic swirling masses that galactic intelligence reports described, but organized formations following established routes. Kaeg activated the ship's passive sensors, recording everything while maintaining complete silence. What the instruments revealed challenged every assumption the galactic forces had made about their enemy. The swarm wasn't a mindless plague. It was a civilization. The bioships moved in complex patterns that spoke of sophisticated communication and coordination. Smaller vessels tended larger ones in what could only be described as nurturing behavior. Construction entities worked together to build massive organic structures that pulsed with internal energy. Most shocking of all, they were cultivating new forms of life in carefully maintained environmental zones. As Kaeg watched, a group of swarm entities approached a dead planet that galactic records listed as completely consumed. Instead of attacking it, they began secreting substances that caused new growth to emerge from the barren surface. Within hours, primitive plant-like organisms were spreading across the rocky landscape. They weren't destroyers. They were gardeners on a galactic scale. The realization hit Kaeg like a physical blow. The galactic defense forces weren't fighting an invasion. They were fighting a species trying to heal a damaged universe. The swarm's attacks on inhabited worlds weren't acts of aggression, but desperate attempts to prevent further ecological collapse. From their perspective, the galactic species were the plague. Beings who consumed resources without giving back, who turned living worlds into sterile technological wastelands, who fought wars that left entire star systems as radioactive graveyards. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission on emergency frequencies. Kaeg activated the receiver and heard Admiral Koreth's voice crackling through layers of encryption. Silent current. This is Kepler Station. We have a priority alert. Long-range sensors detect massive swarm movement heading toward the Centauri colonies. Estimated time of arrival is 18 hours. Request immediate return for tactical consultation. Kaeg keyed the transmitter for a single burst reply. Understood. En route. Prepare for complete tactical revision. The journey back to Kepler Station took 12 hours. But Kaeg used every minute to analyze the recorded data and formulate a new strategy. By the time the silent current docked, the human had developed a plan that would either save the galaxy or confirm that Earth's warriors were as primitive as everyone believed. The command center buzzed with activity when Kaeg arrived. Admiral Koreth was coordinating defensive deployments, while Commander Vex managed evacuation protocols for the threatened colonies. General Thorax stood before the tactical displays, his massive frame radiating frustration as he watched enemy force estimates climbing higher with each update. 1 million bioships, he rumbled. Maybe more. Even if we strip defenders from every other system, we can only assemble 300,000 vessels to oppose them. It won't be enough, Admiral Koreth said grimly. Not with conventional tactics. Their bioships are too adaptable, too numerous. We need a breakthrough, and we need it now. All eyes turned to Kaeg as the human entered the command center. The quiet warrior moved to the central display and began calling up the recorded data from the reconnaissance mission. "You're right that conventional tactics won't work," Cage said, "but that's because you're fighting the wrong war against the wrong enemy." The recorded images filled the holographic display, swarm entities tending to damaged worlds, nurturing new growth, working together in patterns that spoke of compassion rather than hunger. "This is impossible," Commander Vex breathed. "Our intelligence clearly shows them consuming entire civilizations." "Your intelligence shows the end result," Cage replied, "but not the intent. Look at these patterns. They're not random destruction. They're selective harvesting. They take what they need to restore ecological balance, and they leave the rest to regenerate." Admiral Koreth's tentacles writhed in agitation. "Even if that's true, it doesn't change the fact that they're destroying our colonies." "Because your colonies are built on worlds that were already dying," Cage said quietly. "Worlds stripped of their natural ecosystems to make room for industry and technology. The swarm isn't attacking you. They're trying to save what's left of those worlds before it's too late." General Thorax slammed his fist on the command console. "Are you suggesting we surrender our territory to these creatures?" "I'm suggesting we find a way to coexist," Cage replied, "because the alternative is a war that neither side can win. They have the numbers and the adaptation capability to eventually overwhelm your defenses, but you have the technology and territorial advantage to make their mission impossible. Everyone loses." "Coexist?" Admiral Koreth's voice rose in disbelief. "They've already destroyed 17 colonies and killed millions of beings." "Have they?" Cage asked softly. "Or have they relocated populations away from worlds they needed to restore? Show me the casualty reports from the colony attacks." Admiral Koreth hesitated, then called up the data. As the numbers appeared on the display, a puzzling pattern emerged. Despite overwhelming swarm superiority in every engagement, civilian casualties were surprisingly low. Military losses were heavy, but that could be explained by armed resistance to evacuation efforts. "They're not trying to kill your people," Cage continued. "They're trying to remove them from worlds that need ecological restoration. But your military forces interpret evacuation efforts as attacks and respond with violence. The swarm escalates to overcome resistance, and the cycle continues." The command center fell silent as officers processed this revelation. Everything they thought they knew about the conflict had to be reconsidered if the humans' analysis was correct. Commander Vex was the first to speak. "Even if you're right about their motives, how does that help us? The fleet heading toward Centauri is still going to devastate those colonies unless we stop it." "We don't stop it," Cage said. "We redirect it." The human moved to the tactical display and began sketching out a new plan. The Centauri colonies were built in a system with 3 dead worlds, planets that were strip-mined centuries ago and abandoned as worthless. Instead of defending the inhabited worlds, we offer the swarm the dead ones. Give them what they actually want. "And if they reject the offer," General Thorax demanded. "Then we make them an offer they can't refuse," Cage replied with that dangerous smile. "But not through force, through understanding." Cage began outlining a strategy that sounded like madness to conventional military thinking. Instead of deploying defensive fleets, they would send small diplomatic vessels carrying ecological data about the dead worlds. Instead of establishing defensive perimeters, they would create safe corridors for swarm ships to reach their targets without encountering resistance. "You're asking us to trust our enemies," Admiral Koreth said. "I'm asking you to understand them," Cage corrected. "In my tradition, we say that to defeat an enemy, you must first become them. See through their eyes, feel their motivations, understand their fears and desires. Only then can you find the path to victory." "And if you're wrong?" Commander Vex asked. "If they really are bent on destruction?" Cage was quiet for a moment, then spoke with absolute certainty. "If I'm wrong, you can always return to conventional warfare. But if I'm right, we might be about to witness the beginning of something unprecedented in galactic history. A war ending not in conquest or surrender, but in understanding. The next 6 hours were the most intense in Kepler Station's history. Diplomatic protocols that hadn't been used in centuries were hastily revised. Communication systems were reconfigured to transmit ecological data packets. Most critically, Admiral Koreth had to convince fleet commanders throughout the galaxy to stand down their forces and allow enemy ships to pass unchallenged through their territories. When the swarm fleet arrived at Centauri, they found not a defensive formation waiting to oppose them, but a single, small vessel broadcasting an offer of cooperation. The message, translated into mathematical concepts that any intelligent species could understand, was simple. We offer 3 dead worlds for restoration. In exchange, we ask for peaceful coexistence with the living ones. For 12 agonizing hours, the swarm fleet hung motionless in space while their collective consciousness considered this unprecedented offer. Galactic leaders held their breath, knowing that billions of lives hung in the balance. Then, slowly, the massive bioships began changing course toward the dead worlds. Within days, the abandoned planets that had been lifeless for centuries began showing signs of new growth. The swarm worked with incredible efficiency, breaking down accumulated toxins and rebuilding atmospheric systems. What had been barren rock became the foundation for new ecosystems more diverse and beautiful than anything in recorded galactic history. The transformation was so remarkable that other systems began offering their own dead worlds for restoration. Within months, a new treaty framework emerged, the Ecological Cooperation Accords, which established protocols for joint terraforming projects and resource sharing between the galactic civilization and the Swarm Collective. Back on Kepler Station, Admiral Koreth found Kaga standing before a viewport, watching swarm bioships working alongside galactic construction vessels in perfect harmony. The sight would have been impossible to imagine just weeks before. "How did you know?" she asked. "How could you see what all our intelligence agencies missed?" Kaga was quiet for a long moment, then spoke softly. "My ancestors taught that the greatest victory is the one achieved without fighting. But to find that path, you must understand that every enemy is someone fighting for something they believe in. The swarm believed they were saving the galaxy from ecological collapse. Your forces believed they were defending civilization from destruction. Both were right, in their own way." "And now?" Admiral Koreth asked. "Now they're working together toward the same goal," Kaga replied. "Sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to help them achieve what they really want, and discover that what they want isn't really opposed to what you want." Admiral Koreth studied the human warrior with new respect. "Earth's contribution to galactic security has been significant. What will you do now?" Kaga smiled, the expression warmer than any the being had shown before. "Return to Earth and prepare the next generation of terrain warriors, because space is just another environment to master, and there are always new challenges waiting in the darkness between stars." As the transport pod carrying Kaga back to Earth departed Kepler Station, beings throughout the galaxy were beginning to understand that sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't superior technology or overwhelming force. Sometimes it's the wisdom to see your enemy clearly enough to realize they're not your enemy at all. The Galactic Defense Forces learned that day that Earth's warriors weren't just skilled at fighting in any terrain. They were skilled at transforming any conflict into terrain where victory was possible for everyone involved. And in the depths of space, where dead worlds bloomed with new life under the care of former enemies working as partners, the galaxy discovered what Earth had always known, that the strongest people are not those who show strength in front of others, but those who choose understanding over conflict when the choice matters most.